What's up, guys? What is up? Welcome back to another episode of Deck Talk Podcast. And today we are fixing to go to school again. And just like we have told you before, we're going to have Caleb come on here during all the transitions, and he's going to do some lake breakdowns for us. And we finally got our schedules to match up. Caleb's been a little bit busy with the Elite Fishing Expo, and so that's finally over with, and so we finally got him on. But before we do anything else, we got some business. I want to let you know that this episode is brought to you by Bruiser Baits, FireFly Outdoor Marines, YoloTek, Spearpoint Hooks, Pro Line Baits, Joe Burns Rods, and Cornfield Fishing Gear. So, guys, let's get started. If you don't know, I am Colin Burnett.
I'm Pappy J.
And this gentleman that we have on that's got here with us, I think everybody knows who this is. And if you don't, shame on you.
Yes, sir.
And you are fixing to find out why I say that, because this guy right here, Caleb with BassQuest Fishing Charters, is the man. I call him the fish whisperer, the Puerto Rican redneck. He answers to about anything.
That's right.
And, But, guys, if you don't know, this right here is Caleb Bell. What's up, brother?
What's up, man?
Man, I am stoked to have you on here. I've got some questions, and let's see.
I'm trying to share it right here. Oh, share media. Oh, no, that's not the right deal. I'm trying to share the stream. Looking
Heck
for it.
yeah. We got to, I got to remember to go live myself on Instagram. Oops. So, but guys, so we got Caleb going to come on here. We're going to let him do his thing, and I thoroughly enjoy this. And if you have not seen Caleb do his map studies, you need to go to the link that's in the description. I've got his YouTube channel on there, and go and watch his map studies, his lake breakdowns, and you are going to be impressed. It is definitely going to help out your fishing game. And but with that being said,
It's one of the best I've seen.
It is.
I mean, it truly is.
I want to. I need to ask you though. Did you have a guide trip today?
I sure did.
Tell us about them little fish you're catching today.
We smashed them today. We pulled up on, checked 3 different ledges, and the third one I checked was just loaded. And we pulled up and went through all of our bait in about 2 hours. It's just every cast. They got bit on every single bait at least once.
So what was your biggest one?
Biggest one today, I think, was 7.6, if I can remember right. And then we had another one, 7, I think a 6-pounder or 2, and 5s. A lot of just solid ones too. Those like I'm talking about 3-pounders, just little footballs. They were looking good. A lot of them are really healthy. A lot of the bigger fish we caught were more recent spawn, so they were a little bit skinnier. That 7 that he caught should have been a lot bigger than what it was.
Now, and that should be the last little cycle of spawning that we have here on Chick, correct?
No.
Really?
I see them, I guess it'll be pretty close. I see them all the way till June nowadays, like in the really far backs of creeks. Some of those creek fish will spawn real late. But yeah, most of them now, I mean, it's weird, with these Florida strains that we've got. A lot of these fish you'll see spawning anywhere from second week of March all the way until, first couple weeks of June. So it's pretty wild. There's not very many on each one of those extremes. We still have, I would say, the majority of the fish go on somewhere in April or May. But there's so many outliers. It's really nice because I feel like with Florida strains, just the way they are, in Florida, they do the same thing. They spawn a lot. They have a really long spawn cycle. different waves is what I should say. The fish themselves don't spawn a lot. But
Right.
there's multiple waves of fish that spawn. And so it kind of helps us in a river system where we have water fluctuations and storms and things like that. I feel like it helps us ensure that at some point each year we have a good spawn. So I
Yeah.
think that's overall a good thing for the lake.
And one thing that we get questioned, especially more so during like end of April, May, and all that, is people will ask us like, do we like fishing bedfish?
Yeah.
And does it affect? With catching them on bed? Do we think that it affects their spawn?
I mean, anytime you catch a fish, you're putting stress on that fish. So I feel like it does affect to some degree, no matter what. So when you're sitting there harassing that fish on bed, and you do catch it on bed. Now there's a pretty good chance, just instinctually that the fish will go back down. But we know that we have a lot of tournaments during the spawn. Also, that tends to be where it coincides a lot, and a lot of people do bed fish during the tournament. So if you take that fish, you haul it 10 miles down the river, that's not going to work out. But again, going back to having multiple waves, I feel like that helps us in those situations to where we're not ruining everything. There's a lot of fish in the lake and a lot of fish that are going to spawn. So any fishing pressure, I guess, to an extent, affects everything, I guess is the way I would describe it.
Well, because, and I tell them like if a female is up on bed but has not like actually went through the spawn and stuff like that, and you catch it, and let's say you take it to Chester Frost and they release it, I believe that she's going to go through that spawning cycle. Am I correct?
They could. One thing that happens too, if you catch a fish pre-spawn, or a fish that's getting ready to go on bed, sometimes just the stress of catching the fish, again, taking it around in live, it can cause those fish to actually dump their eggs or absorb their eggs. So you can actually inhibit that fish from spawning. There's a whole lot that goes into that. When we actually catch fish, it changes the dynamic for that fish. There's a lot of evidence showing that their growing cycle, it affects the growing cycle for the year. If you have to get to truly giant fish, when you're talking about double digit or teener potential, there's a lot of things that have to go right for that fish, because if they get caught a lot during a year or caught in general, the stress of that can cause them, one, to dump eggs, two, the stress itself can cause them to actually lose a portion of that growing cycle. So you can actually inhibit that. So say that fish was growing, this fish grows an average of 1 pound a year, let's just say hypothetically, and the fish is going to live to be 11 years old. If it's caught 3 times during that period and its growth rate is affected, that fish might not ever make it to 11-pound potential on down the road.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot to say that might have something to do with the reason that we don't see as many really high teener bass anymore, or 20 pounders. There's a whole lot of different factors with that, though. A lot of that's new lakes, having active carbon in the lake. When you have a newer lake, you just have an explosion of growth in a newer lake. So there's a whole lot. I can go down that rabbit hole forever. That's fun to think
now,
about.
do you think that, like, for instance, I've seen multiple times like where people from out of state, they've come here, they've caught maybe not a double digit, but let's say 8-9 pounder, but they're taking that sucker home just to go put it back in its lake, or in their lake.
Yeah.
Do you think that happens more so than what? I mean, because I've seen it probably 5 or 6 times. So where, especially when that U.S. tournament,
like a fair amount, I would say. There was a big thing with the one of the big bass tournaments that I heard a while back, that they were taking the fish that were weighed in the big bass tournament and doing something with them. A lot of this for me is just hearsay. I don't have any empirical evidence of that or anything, but I have heard that multiple times where people are taking a big fish or the fish, they're like, oh, Florida genetics, I'm going to take this up to my pond.
Yeah.
I don't really think that makes a big difference. Now, I will say it is extremely important if you're moving bass, TWRA, I'm sure they frown upon moving any kind of bass, but especially do not be moving around spotted bass of any kind. That is not good at all. We're having a major issue, and with spotted bass creating mean mouse, in other words, out spawning or over competing, especially for our big Tennessee River smallmouth. And sometime within our lifetime, there will be no more true smallmouth on the Tennessee River, and it's going to be sooner than later from evidence. Last shock surveys, I was talking to one of the fisheries biologists that I know, and I think he was saying somewhere between 60% of the brown fish or spotted bass that they caught were some sort of hybrid. So that's already a huge portion of it. So definitely that's kind of a big thing. And Alex Rudd has done a ton to bring this to the attention of people. Hopefully whenever my state record spot gets certified or not certified, that'll be a really good opportunity for us to kind of bring that to light a little bit more. The dangers of moving these Coosa bass. We all know it's a few tournament anglers that were doing that, and it's because they're easy to catch. They grow fast, they get big, they're easy to catch. And so if you can lock them down into an area on a lake that you're competing on, you can go into those little areas and come out, with a decent limit of those spotted bass. But what it's done inadvertently is cause a major issue. And all it takes is one idiot to put them in a Great Lake or something like that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
well, I mean,
it's already happened in Cherokee. It's happening on a lot of our Highland Reservoir lakes already, where people are putting those bass in smallmouth lakes. I've heard of them being caught on Cherokee now, Alabama bass, and on Norris Lake. And there's no other way for them to get there other than a person just saying, hey, I like catching spotted bass, and putting them in the live well and taking them over there and dumping them off.
Yeah. I know that we were talking to Chad Watts with FireFly Outdoor Marines here this past Friday at the Elite Expo, and we were talking about Dale Hollow, and he was saying that he was catching like 6 to 7 pound spots on Dale Hollow, and I'm like, I didn't know that there were. One, I just thought Dale Hollow was just a strictly a smallmouth fishery.
Dale Hollow has all three species. It's a phenomenal largemouth fishery, a phenomenal smallmouth fishery. Now, to my knowledge, there are no Alabama spotted bass in Dale Hollow. Now, someone can prove me wrong on that. Those are Kentucky spotted bass, which we know do not compete as directly or as aggressively with the smallmouth. Our main issue.
How can you tell the difference in between that Coosa bass or the Alabama spotted bass?
So obviously one way is DNA. There are some markers though. Probably the easiest thing that I can tell right off the bat looking the difference between a Kentucky and an Alabama is the shape. Alabama spotted bass are shaped like a torpedo. Like if you took, what a true striper looks like, and Alabama spotted bass is shaped very much like that. They're very long, cylindrical, streamlined. They're like little mako sharks. Kentucky's short, fat little blimps. Yeah. And color is usually a little different on there as well. Like you can see color-wise, like Alabama bass have like a really dark green, almost a blue hue to them. That's my printer's trying to update it, so chill, bro. But yeah, they tend to have a darker blue hue to them, whereas the other spots have more of a yellow to lighter green color. In the Kentuckys, it's one of those things like if you hold them back and forth or see them, like you tell right away kind of what strain they are. Now in some lakes, you've got Alabamas, you've got Kentuckys, you've got largemouth, smallmouth, and so at that point, genetically, you're probably all over the place. There's probably got to be, I don't know what the science is on that, but there's got to be some intermingling between Kentuckys and Alabamas when they are in the same lake, I would think.
Yeah. So, what like, let's say, would you suggest, like, if you catch a spotted bass, just to go on and take that sucker to the frying pan?
That's what TWRA would tell you for sure. Is try to keep as many as you can. Now, if everyone's noticed this change in regulation for the smallmouth, the ability to keep more smallmouth and potentially weigh them in tournaments and stuff like that. That's kind of a double-edged sword. It's kind of one of those things where you're bowing to the fact that there's really nothing you can do anymore, like
Right.
in the lakes that we have now, like in Chickamauga, in Nickajack, in Watts Bar. There will be a point in the not too distant future where there will not be true smallmouth anymore. That's just the way it is. Like, well, I think the biggest thing is to raise awareness to keep people from continuing this cycle. That's
Yeah.
the biggest thing, because all it takes, there's such an aggressive predator, and they dominate any kind of ecosystem that they get in. All it takes is one guy just to say, you know what, screw science. I like catching spotted bass, and he takes them and dumps them out there, and then you go, and
Yeah.
then the whole cycle starts over again. So it's more of a getting the information out to people and having people make the right decision. That's really what it boils down to. People need to
Yeah.
understand that there are studies that confirm this, and it's selfish to do anything else. I guess that's the best way I could describe it. And if someone's doing that, it's like, get them to stop, and if you can't, report them. I mean, that's really what it is. It's like nobody wants to rat on each other or whatnot, but
Yeah.
it's well known in the fishing community. I mean, there's certain people that have done this that brag about it, that are very high up on some of these tournament trails and stuff. So
Yeah, but the thing is, it's
very
hurting the fisheries more than anything.
it's hurting the fisheries. It's hurting future generations. And my
Yeah.
kids won't be able to have a shot at catching a 7-pound smallmouth on the Tennessee River.
Yeah.
Period. Like, it was
So,
won't happen.
can you talk a little bit to go away from spots and smallmouths? Can you talk a little bit about the F1s?
Yeah.
Like, what
So
is an F1?
in F1, that's kind of what Chickamauga was famous for in the beginning. So we started stocking Florida strain largemouth. This is kind of an interesting story. It's a grand experiment, right? We have Chickamauga Lake. Chickamauga Lake as a whole was probably one of the worst fisheries on the Tennessee River chain at the time. Struggled a lot of small fish. The grass itself had been killed out in the 80s. Now, whether you believe that was environmental or just the spraying that was done there's a lot of different back and forth on that. But we didn't really have grass, and that really stunted our fishery for a long time. We had a lot of fish in there, and so somebody within the TWRA decided that we were going to start trying something, which was to stock true Florida bass in Tennessee in Chickamauga Lake. And the first several years, nothing really came of it at all.
Mm-hmm.
What they were doing was basically taking a bunch of Florida strains. They were going to every ramp on the lake, dumping out some Florida strains and just seeing what would happen. And then after that, nothing was happening. Instead of giving up on it, somebody had the brilliant idea of saying, okay, what we're actually going to do is we're just going to have two areas that we are going to stock these bass, right? And it ended up being Wolf Teaver and Grasshopper are the two areas that they stock Florida strain. They did that for several more years. Somewhere along the lines of, I believe it was between 17 and I guess it was between like 15 and 20 years down the line of actually stocking Florida strain bass, something happened. And what happened was some of these Florida strain bass were finding true northern strain bass and spawning with them. And when you have that happen, it creates what's called a back cross. And what we call it is an F1. That is a first generation cross between a Florida and a northern largemouth. And those fish have some really cool characteristics. One of the characteristics is that they have some of the longevity of a northern strain bass. They are not as susceptible to the cold weather temperature changes as a Florida bass, but they have a lot of the fast growth aspects of a Florida fish. So what happens is that first generation, that is like the creme de la creme, right? That's as good as it's going to get. Those fish are like the bomb. What happens after that is you start getting subsequent generations. So your next generation is technically an F2, F3, F4, F5, and you get a little bit of drop off on that. So my thing, and for years I said that, I was like, why in the heck don't we just stock F1s? But after having some good conversations with Alex on it, with some of the biologists that he's had on his podcast, it was really clear that they were saying they've tried this over and over again. And really, once you have those crosses going, you start to get really big dips in growth as you go subsequent generations. So the best thing that you can do is keep throwing Florida genetics at it. And so that's pretty much what you have going on, is you can kind of extend that cycle by continuing to throw Florida genetics. And that's why they're not stocking northern strains. They're only stocking Floridas, and that's why they're not stocking F1s. So I was a part of that confusion for the longest time. I couldn't understand it. And a lot of people locally, it's like, we know the F1s are the ones getting big. Like, what the heck, man? Why are we just throwing Floridas and we're not throwing northerns in the water? That's why. There's a whole lot of empirical evidence that has been gathered that relates to that, and that is the evidence, period. You throw as many Florida genetics as you can, because those Florida genetics, I guess is the best way I can describe it, drop off dramatically, whereas the northern genetics don't. So you can continue to get yourself as close as you could to that F1. So that first generation is when you had this, and it coincided with a couple other things. So we had some really good spawns. And we also, and it was because we didn't have a whole lot of water fluctuation, they changed the way that they were doing their summer to winter pool. And so it allowed some fish to have a little bit better spawns. And on top of that, we happened to get grass back at the same time. We got, instead of, in the 80s, we had milfoil that was killed out. We get hydrilla back. It comes on super strong. And it comes on the strongest that I've ever seen it. It comes on in 2016. And if anybody thinks back to 2016, there's something you'll probably remember. And that was that we had the biggest drought on record. So for like 200 days, I believe, we didn't have significant rainfall in this area. And what that does, one, you don't have dirty water, right? So that plants can photosynthesize to their maximum. Two, you don't have current, which keeps your grass growing really well. And so we had hydrilla growing in places that you'll never see it anymore. It was an incredible year. I was seeing hydrilla topping out in 16-foot water. And that exploded Chickamauga. And as you guys know, right around that time, multiple teener bass are getting caught. Like between, I think it was about 2014, 2016, the same year, the state record gets caught, right? Gabe catches a 15-2, which still stands as the Tennessee state record. Several 14s are caught in the subsequent 2 years. Then you start to see a drop-off. You're not seeing as many teener bass at all. You're not seeing near as many 10-pounders. In the height of all this, some of it also was, I didn't even mention this, but the Alabama rig, right? It just kind of coincided with that. Like the Alabama rig, the ultimate fishing lure at the time, it was a perfect storm. Like of different factors that caused this. But there was at one point, there was between 120 to almost 200 double digits coming out of Chickamauga every year on artificial, no live bait, just artificial. So that was the heyday. And so after that, what happened is your first generation F1s started to drop off. So in other words, you're finding fewer and fewer true northern strains for a true Florida strain to spawn with. You have Florida strains that are spawning with an F1 or an F2, or you have an F2 spawning with a northern strain. So it's a numbers thing. And so that continues to drop off until you have now where there's I feel like a lot of the double digits, we still have the size because we have the Florida genetics, but a lot of these double digit fish, I feel like cap out at like 10 to 11 pounds. That's why, it's 1%, probably less than 1% of fish get to that 10 to 11 pound mark, right?
Right.
Now, instead of there being, maybe there was at one point there was 5%, maybe it was 7% of fish that had the potential to go 12, 13, 14, 15 pounds. I feel like that's a lot lower now. Just doing the math on the sheer amount of double digits that have been in my boat, there's been 2 teeners that we've landed out of, over 100 double digits now. 2 teeners out of 100 double digits. So out of 100 of the 1% or less, 2 of them have made it to that caliber
Right.
fish. A few, but it's just an interesting thing. And there's a whole lot of factors that you could, say we could prototype this out or situation it out to where if we could take Chickamauga, looking at the map that I've got over here, if you could take it and drop it down to the original river channel for 6 years. So that would be, I guess that would be probably a 12 or 15 foot drawdown.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
At least, maybe more. If you drew it down that far and you left it for 5 years and let CRP and buckbrush and stuff grow up and planted it with native grasses and just up the carbon buildup, what would happen is when you flooded that back, you would have an insane resurgence of huge fish. Fish would grow exponentially faster. And that's what's happening on lakes in Texas. You have O.H. Ivy, it's 30-year-old lake, right? 30-something-year-old reservoir. These younger reservoirs that still have standing timber, that still have all that carbon, those are the ones really showing out. And so when I'm looking at fisheries that have potential, for me to go, and I'm if I want to go catch a teener-sized fish, there's a few on my radar, and that is one of the big factors. You're looking for a new lake. You're looking at growth rates from TWRA. Browns Creek Lake is a great example. It got on my radar years ago. TWRA did a shock study on this lake. So it had been road known and actually flooded. So it was brand new growth, brand new stocking of fish. And within, I want to say it was within 6 years, they had shocked a double digit. So
really?
Pound plus grow rate, and there was other ones where they were saying it was 2.5, almost 3 pounds of growth per year on a largemouth bass, which is just insane.
That's
Our lake, I feel we're lucky to get a pound, and we have how much food we have in this lake. These fish have the opportunity to eat, but it is what they get, the nutrients from the water itself, that causes this kind of crazy thing. Going back in time, let's go to the world record smallmouth bass, and the double-digit smallmouth that were caught at the time out of Dale Hollow was when it was a new lake, right? Yeah. It was the first few generations of those fish when there was still standing timber in the lake. Everything was recently flooded, so all that carbon was getting pulled into the water, all that nutrients into the water.
Well, I have a question right here from Stupid Duck Rod and Gun Club.
Yeah.
So he asked, have you noticed if any of these species patterns different?
You said species patterns?
Yeah.
I don't know if
are the species patterns different?
Are you talking about different patterns of bass? If patterning them is different, in that case, yes. These fish kind of get in different areas. The smallmouth act different on Chickamauga than the largemouth do. They get in different areas. Spotted bass tend to sit around a lot of the areas where the largemouth are right now, but they segregate, which is kind of interesting. They'll kind of be off to the side a little bit. So there is a whole lot of difference in the life cycle and spawn cycle, especially of largemouth to smallmouth and spotted bass. The reason why spotted bass and smallmouth we have the trouble with the intermingling is that their life cycle is very similar. They like to hang out in the same areas. They like to spawn around the same time, which is usually a little earlier than a largemouth. And so it's one of those things that just kind of coincides more. And that's why you don't see as many crosses between largemouth and spotted bass. You know what I mean? You don't see a whole lot of crosses between largemouth.
See, that's what I was going to ask. How come you don't see that, the largemouth and the spot?
Yeah, you don't see a whole lot of that. Now, I've heard of that happening, especially in lakes in Texas. There's apparently mean mouths, or I think they still call them mean mouths in Texas, that are crosses between largemouth and smallmouth there. But that could have something to do with the habitat, right? Mm-hmm. The fish are kind of, in a lot of those lakes, you're talking about drains, ditches, natural lakes, standing timber. So the fish, I would think, in a lot of ways would have to cohabitate, whereas diverse cover fisheries like Chickamauga, where you have a lot of limestone bluff walls, but you also have a lot of grass and shell beds. Those fish will not interact as much in that. Now, there's areas that they do, but I feel like it's got to be a contributing factor, and some of it might be genetics too. I'd be really curious to see what like Steve Barton and some of the other biologists would have to say about that. It might be where genetically it is very difficult to make that happen. Maybe there's a very slow success rate in that kind of a spawn.
Yeah.
Too. So it could be a whole number of factors. It'd be kind of interesting to know, though.
Yeah.
Now, my dad asked the question, said, "Thanks, guys, for the education. Caleb, are you seeing any improvements in the grass environment for chick?"
Yes and no. So it's been very discouraging. I'm not going to lie. The last few years, I've seen so many more spray boats, and I had a conversation about this. This was actually a pretty good part of Dillon, Florida. So when we were at the Elite Fishing Show this past weekend, shout out to whoever showed up for that. Make sure that you're there next year. But I was doing a map study talk, and it just kind of happened. Dillon's working the booth right next to me, Dillon Flardo, wishing I was fishing. Phenomenal guide, insanely good tournament angler, and co-owner of Talk and Tackle Fishing Shop there and Lodge in Hickson, Tennessee. So shout out to those guys. But Dillon was there, and I was like, dude, come over here and let's do this map study together. And it turned out amazing. We should have filmed it. We'll probably have to do one like a live later, and we'll go back through and talk about what we talked about. But amazing. Dillon dropped some bombs over there. He gave away some juice he probably shouldn't have given away, but it was really, really good. But that was one thing that we were talking about together was that the eelgrass in this lake is actually doing really well. And a lot of people, eelgrass gets kind of a bad rap, right? Like guys that like to throw top water, like if you like to throw a spook, that eelgrass might like get in your way and just be a huge pain in the butt. But shout out to, I believe, Carter Day. We were talking with him about this, or Dillon was, and he was saying that is like a huge savior of a lot of fisheries, is because that eelgrass will blow into an area and sit there for sometimes a really long period of time and make it almost unfishable. And then it'll blow out of that area. And so you get breaks for the fish in between there. Not only that, the fish love to live in eelgrass. It's really hard to scope them out of it. So it forces you to fish. And it does a lot of things. One of the other things it does is it is a very stout grass, right? It's very resilient would be a good word for that. And so hydrilla can use that eelgrass in order to stalk up and to hold its roots, if that makes sense. They can use the eelgrass as structure. So it gives your hydrilla, your milfoil, and some of your native grasses the opportunity to survive flood stage current and stuff like that. So there's a whole lot of great factors there. So that, to me, tremendously outweighs any of the negatives. Like anybody has anything bad to say about eelgrass, I'm like, it'll save a fishery. It has saved Guntersville. Guntersville is phenomenal. Probably one of the top fisheries in the country right now. I think that's largely due to eelgrass. Nickajack has the highest population, according to TWRA Fisheries, of bass per square mile of any lake in Tennessee.
Wow.
It's loaded with eelgrass. So I think the great savior of Chickamauga Lake, to bring it back to its glory days, could be eelgrass and its ability to do that. Now, whether or not, TBA is going to spray the heck out of it, we don't know. I've seen flotillas of spray boats. And it makes me sad because I feel like, and this is something that we talked about in our talk, I feel like we could manage our grass just fine with our drawdown. So if we would take our drawdown and we would hold on a little longer before we bring it back up to summer pool, you could experiment with that. Go an extra 2 weeks, go an extra month, and see, because that stunts your grass growth and it forces it to slow down. As you raise that water back up, it's going to slow down the grass growth. So you should be able to manage this lake largely with simply the drawdown itself. So that should be a big factor right there that we could potentially do. It might be really good to actually start drawing down a little sooner in the fall to kind of get rid of some of the grass. But in the end of the day, talking to some of the biologists and stuff, and I tell you what, guys, shout out to Bass After Dark, great podcast. They did an incredible seminar about aquatic vegetation the other day. It's like 2.5 hours long. Everyone should listen to it. A lot of great things to say within that. A lot of stuff to learn. But I'm not sure where I was going with that. But what was I talking about there? We were talking about the drawdown. So the spring, I feel like what in the world? Polar bear, what are you doing? Got the big puppy. With that drawdown like that, we should be able to manage it without as much spraying, in my opinion. I think that could be really huge. Now, there's a whole lot of studies out there saying that the spraying doesn't do anything, but we've all seen. I mean, if you pull up a piece of grass, say you catch a frogfish or a punching fish, the amount of biology within that little patch of grass that you have in your hand is insane. If you look at it closely, there's larvae everywhere. What's up, lovely wife? Larvae everywhere. There is fry everywhere, all kinds of small fish and everything. So when you kill off that grass, you're killing off that biome. So, and we also talk about, everyone says that after they spray the grass, you see this film on the water, and then you notice every fish weighed in the next few tournaments is skinny and has sores all over it. So tell me again that the spraying does not affect anything. I think it's bogus. I think it's fake news. I'm going to say that, fake news. And I think that we need to do something about it. And the biggest factor with that, and I think that this contributing factor to this that's caused us to have a whole lot more grass issues over the last few years, is that there's legislation that has been passed that has allowed organizations like TVA to subcontract out grass spraying. And when you subcontract out the grass spraying and you don't go and do it yourself and manage the fishery yourself and spray the grass, if I'm the subcontractor, okay, all right, we've got our grass, but this is our chemical for the year, our allotment. I don't care what's in the water that I see. I'm going to spray all my chemicals so I can get that amount of chemical next year. I might spray a little bit more besides, so that I can say, I think we're going to need, 10% more. I think you're going to have to bump my numbers a little bit, bud. So it creates this conflict of interest. And something needs to be done about it. It's going to be an issue now on Guntersville, there's some stuff that's been passed in Guntersville. We're already seeing spraying. We've already seen the devastation of this kind of subcontracted spraying in Florida. Shout out to Mikey Balls, has an incredible video talking about that, addressing the spraying in Guntersville, but relating it back to his own experience of watching Okeechobee and some of these other grass lakes in Florida go from being the premier fisheries of a lifetime to reduce to, not anywhere, not a shadow of their former selves. Let's put it that way.
Well, it's like we've had Jerry Russo on, I guess it was a couple months ago when we had him on, and he was telling us on Okeechobee they're spraying, but then they're also going back behind them and they're planting grass in the lakes.
Yeah, a lot of the people
planting the grass to where they have something to do next year, the grass to kill for next year. It's not that.
Yeah. I know a lot of locals over there are taking grasses that they want and putting them back out to try to help out. There's a whole lot. That's again, guys, I highly, highly recommend you go watch the video that Bass After Dark did. Their guests were experts in this, and a great example is just their talk about water hyacinths and the way that the studies are skewed on purpose in order to allow for more spraying by using intentionally. And this is, a problem with statistics, right? You can make the numbers say what you want it to say. And so it can be really difficult to weed down to the truth. But there's some really cool guys within that podcast that were working on that, doing independent studies to hopefully backtrack some of this knowledge, quote unquote, that we're using to manage our lakes. So hopefully we can do something with that in the future. But really, we just got to prove this is some kind of environmental factor, right? Like if we can prove that it's some sort of environmental disaster, I'm sure that they'll have a different way of dealing with it. So
Yeah.
Well, Jamie Jones says what aggravates me is that TVA is allowing lake property owners to hire their own contractors to spray their dock areas to kill the grass when the contractors is through. He empties his containers wherever. Let's see, wherever they want.
yeah, that's okay. So one thing with that is the chemical itself is very expensive. So most of these guys are not going to just dump that. They're going to mix exactly what they need. The problem with it is we live on a river system. And this
So
stuff
what's upstream comes
it
downstream.
can be current pushed. And so what'll happen is you'll have entire grass areas that are killed as kind of a secondary effect of spraying the grass, which is why I'm a big proponent of doing what some other states have done, and they have big machines that actually go through and they till. It's almost like a mower that goes and chops grass. If you're a homeowner and you want to have a clear strip without grass around your house, it's really easy, guys. You take a 2x4, you drill two ends at each side, run a rope through it, weight the thing, throw it in the water, and drag it behind your boat and rip out the little bit of grass in the area that you want. There's no need to one, pay a crap ton of money to somebody to spray that stuff, and two, to potentially cause an issue on down the lake because you chose to use the chemical. So it's a pretty easy thing that you
Right.
can take care of yourself. But yeah, I do agree completely with that. It's like, I don't know necessarily that these guys are dumping the chemical. I would probably push back on that just because it is expensive from what I've heard. So that
Yeah.
maybe not, but definitely affects. Just like say if you're out in the field and you're spraying Roundup, if you're not careful with that and there's a big wind, you could overspray and kill a bunch of other stuff you had no intention of killing.
See, that was going to be my question. How do we know that there's not, homeowners out there spraying that Roundup around the edge of the bank or the wall, or
So
and leaking down into our river system?
So if you're talking about like Roundup itself, like a weed killer that we use in our
Right.
lawns, I'm not sure that would affect the aquatic vegetation as much, just because of solution to pollution is dilution, right? Like we know
Right.
that from cleaning products and stuff like that. A lot of those products, as soon as they hit water, are going to dissipate to the extent that they're not going to do anything. And that's again why I push back on the fact that they say that this stuff is fine for the water. It's no big deal. If you have something that's concentrated enough to throw in thousands upon thousands, millions of gallons of water and still latch on and kill vegetation, you can't tell me that's not doing something else.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean, that
Let's
right
see.
there is something strong, right? So and there's different products that are used. Pellets can be a bad one just because they can, when they drop those. I think it's copper sulfate. I think is
Yeah.
don't quote me on that, guys. You should definitely do your own research on that. But some of the pellets I've heard that when they drop those in areas, and a lot of them now have. If you look at these boats, they're not spraying chemical. They actually have these tubes that run down and they spray at the root level. When they do that, a lot of times that stuff will not come back for a number of years in that
Yeah.
area when they spray that. Now, thankfully, we've got some grasses in the lake that are really highly combative to whatever they're spraying, like the naiad that you see in certain parts of the lake. It's done a great job of protecting hydrilla or letting hydrilla recover right away, because it's almost impossible to kill the naiad. So it stays stocked up. It might turn brown a little bit, but it'll stay stocked up. And so once they killed the hydrilla, it has a chance to late season grow and stock up that naiad right there. And the same thing with eelgrass. Eelgrass
Yeah.
is exceptionally difficult to kill, but these people will get a run at it sometimes. I mean, it is incredible. And to me, it's like, that is a lot of money to spend on that, guys. And
Yeah.
I've heard mixed things. One of the things I've heard that the reason they spray is because, on the nuclear plant like Sequoia, if the intake is clogged by grass, it can cost several $1 million. I've heard on the Gunnersville side, they say that if their turbines are clogged with eelgrass, it can cost several million dollars an hour or whatnot. And I get that, but to me, that is such a silly solution to that problem.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's
Well, I got a couple of
like,
questions.
cry once and engineer a way to shield from that grass, or engineer turbines that will pass the grass, engineer a grate that can be cleared, self-cleared, or cleared by manually for your intakes. Like, to me, that is a much more cost-effective solution than throwing, I don't even know how much money every year at vegetation control.
Yeah.
So
Well, and the thing is like, what was it like? Was it 4 or 5 years ago when they dropped pellets like right below the 60 bridge?
mhm.
And I mean, it just there was no grass. Usually, you can go right there below 60 bridge, and that whole flat right there is just nothing but a grass flat. And then,
It was
I mean,
nuts. They nuked that.
you remember
So they
that?
nuked it from 60 Bridge, and the effects of it were so bad. There was nothing but spray boats out there for several days. The effects of it and the push from the current was so crazy that it killed grass that was inside Sail Creek and Grasshopper. It killed some of the
Yeah,
grass that was in there. It killed everything that I could find that I knew of. It killed all the way down, at least to Possum Creek. What you guys
yeah.
know, how many miles would that be if you guys had to
That's
guess?
I would say,
10 to 15 miles?
yeah,
yeah,
I was gonna say
yeah.
about 12.
Yeah, I,
So
I would think that. So, I mean, that shows you some of the effects or potential effects. And to me, if a product like that is making it that far and still doing its job, so to speak,
yeah,
that's incredible. Like, that's got to have some kind of other secondary effect. I just can't believe that it doesn't.
yeah.
You know what I mean? Like,
We got a couple questions. Let's see. The traveling fisherman says, I see a lot of places getting sprayed. It's awful. Definitely affecting the fisheries." And
good.
then he also says that I see the neighborhood ponds getting sprayed, and it also destroys these small bodies of water.
Yeah.
Um, then Patrick Gray says, when you have a lake that is controlled by dams like ours, the Corps does not worry about the fishing. They control the lakes. That's their job. But that is what I was told, which
That's
I have
exactly right.
heard
That's a great
heard
point.
that.
The point, the Tennessee River was not, as we know it today, the reservoirs along the Tennessee River chain was not created for recreation in any way. It was created
Yeah.
for power generation and shipping, consistent shipping, right? Because if you just had the
Yeah.
torrent of the Tennessee River running at different times of the year with different weather, you wouldn't be able to ship for months on end potentially, right? So this
Mhm.
gives you a way to manage the waterways and safely ship the barges up and down and generate power for local communities and big businesses and stuff like that. So that is the primary objective, and that's where the money is, right? Like, that is the most important thing. I guess my point of contention to that is I feel like there's a way that we could both win. I feel like we can
Yeah.
do better than what we're doing now. That's really what it boils down for, in my personal opinion, is we can do better. Um, we can manage this in a more natural way without spraying as much, and everybody can get what they want to a degree, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, and that's like if they controlled it, like what you were saying, just by the water elevation, just controlling that makes perfect sense to me. One, you're not putting any kind of chemicals in the water,
Yep.
and
Or
so
if
you're
you
not
are, you're
having to
putting it
worry
in
about
at
any
a very
kind of
low rate. You know what I mean? Like, if you
right,
could
right,
cut back, to me, it's like this all. It's I'm not like a black and white type person, so to me, it's like, what can we do now to have the ability to cut back significantly on spraying? How can we instead of increasing the amount of spraying that we're having to do every year, how can we dial that back?
Right.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, and at the same time, have a much better solution to the problems that is causing the need for the spraying in the first place.
Right.
I think that boils down to engineering, and there's probably a way to do this, guys. Like, but there's a lot of politicking that goes onto this. Like a company as big as TVA, they're under tremendous pressure. It takes a long time for them to be able to come up with a solution to something. A lot of it's politically motivated. So when you have, different political parties coming in and out, that can shift things tremendously. So you can have like a full plan in place, and then it just, gone to the wind until the next go around. So there's a lot of factors. Like I feel like I'm kind of trash talking TVA right now, but I'm sure there's tons of other factors. I know that we're having tremendous problems with Sequoia nuclear plant right now. They're hemorrhaging money out of that plant. They're talking about bringing in these smaller type of nuclear plants that have a lot less maintenance. That could be a huge thing for us on down the line. Like these smaller nuclear plants that are way less maintenance, to have a way smaller footprint, that could be an enormous solution right there. So, engineering perspective, I feel like these people are working on the solution. You know what I mean, in some way. But I just wish, in the meantime, let's do the best we can to accommodate both. I guess the recreation side, and to me, like the environmental side. I've always been one of those people that's like, leave it better than you found it. Like, I want to see the river the way, as close to the way it was as possible at all times. Let's minimize human imprint, right?
Right.
And let's just see the natural beauty of what's going on. So that's to me a big factor there. And I think we can do both. I think we can work together as a fishing community, as a recreation community, not just fishermen, and from a standpoint, and do that.
Billy asked, does the eelgrass clean the water as much as what the hydrilla does?
I couldn't tell you. I'm not sure. Just thinking about, so let me just put my like scientist hat on. The filaments or the leaf structures of hydrilla, coontail, and milfoil are very well suited to holding on to materials, whereas eelgrass, it doesn't have as many of those fibers. It has fibers on the underside of it. So I would think surface area, just from what I would think, that it would be a less effective filter. But what it is also is a shield. It is a shield, is a buffer against the natural issues that we have with water fluctuation and current, to allow other grasses to survive. And we think about hydrilla. Hydrilla is considered an invasive species, which it is. Milfoil is also considered an invasive species, but it's really interesting because, again, going back to me nerding out on the Bass After Dark podcast, there's a lot of evidence that's coming out saying that milfoil might actually be a native grass. And there's some other native grasses that are very similar to that we have in the lake now. And it'd be really cool to be able to foster, what if we had a program where we were putting back as much native grass as possible into the lake?
Yeah.
And so it's like we have, again, the best of both worlds. So I think there's ways that we can do this a little bit better than we're doing it now.
Right. Let's see. Patrick says,
what an interesting podcast this has turned into.
We haven't even talked nothing about
what are we talking about? I've got a map pulled up. We're just sitting here like talking science stuff.
Well, it's factual and it's interesting. It's issues that need to be taken care of, just not on our lake, but basically everywhere.
Yeah, nationwide, and probably on a global scale to some extent. I feel like we can do this. And it's just a matter of getting good information out of there. And I feel like there's people that are working on that now and being able to use that information in a way that's beneficial to everybody.
So, has there been any studies done on any of this stuff
Tons.
that you know of?
Tons of studies. But the problem is a lot of these studies, a lot of the management practices that we have on our lakes are based on extremely outdated information. Like extremely outdated information and information that is skewed based off of location. So here's a good example. The hyacinth, water hyacinth, right? They said that the water hyacinth can grow like, I think, double in size every day. Well, the study they did was on a lake where there was a tremendous amount of agriculture. And so the sheer amount of fertilizer that was getting in the water from that agriculture was causing the hyacinth in that one local area to grow that fast. So how do you take that information and apply it to management and be effective?
Well, it goes back to like what you were saying.
Information that you want.
You can make your stats look whatever you want them to make.
And so the fact that we've got money behind this, the fact that we've got independent people doing it that are fishermen, I feel like we can, again, maybe even skewed the opposite way a little bit, but I feel like we should always try to look at both perspectives, right?
Yeah.
Try to I'd say like the truth, or if you want to call it truth, let's say like that maybe the right decision or the right call is somewhere going to be in the middle of those two things. But it gives us having the more data you have, the more accurate you can be, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the fact that we're gathering data from sources that are not profiting extremely from it, I feel like can help us a lot in the long run.
Yeah. Jamie Jones asks, what are the floating devices on the lake which blink with the blinking light on it? One is above the witch's ditch and the other is below the nuclear plant.
So from what I haven't heard this specifically from anyone or done any research on it. From what I have heard from people that I know in TWRA or whatever, those are water level indicators. So when you increase water flow or decrease water flow from the dam and they're 60 miles apart or 30 miles apart, it takes a long time for that input to cause an output, right? It takes a long time for that water to ease its way down the fishery. That's what enables us to actually chase a current down the lake fishing ledges. Same kind of concept. So by having that below all the tributaries, especially the big tributaries when you're talking about Saudi Creek, Sail Creek, Hiwassee, having those inputs below that point to me is an information thing. So I can see based on I'm letting out this amount of water, I expect the water to rise this much on Chickamauga Dam from Watts Bar Dam. Well, if I'm getting a huge inflow from one of these creeks or Hiwassee, I can see that difference and start to make a change in real time instead of getting data that's hours and hours old. So that could probably be the difference. If I had to guess, that could probably be the difference between like a pretty bad flood and a well-managed flood, right?
Yeah.
So that's it. From what I've heard, it's about information on water levels, and from what I think that, just anecdotal evidence in my brain, that's what I would assume it's related to, based on the location of those two things.
Yeah.
John Pate says, are some of the lakes you were fishing in, are they restricted on taking boats out of one lake and putting in another? And are they cleaning the boats and trailers before leaving these tournaments? Events that you were fishing in, boats being cleaned. What I was talking to him the other day, and what he was telling me is like Bass went down there. I think it was for an open. He lives down in South Florida, and they were like quarantining these boats, like the open boats, to where they could not put in from one lake, like when they have that restricted time zone,
Mhm.
or days that they could not be out on the water. They were usually they'd go to another lake and go do a little fishing or whatever. They are not allowing you to take a boat from one lake to another lake.
And usually that's in order to combat some kind of local invasive species. A good example of that is zebra mussels.
Yeah,
The little tiny, I can't remember, it's not called larva. There's another name for what the tiny version or microscopic almost version of that is, but it can be an issue. I know in California they do it because of issues like golden algae is a good example of that. Like if you get that in a lake, and that actually killed off the lake where Dottie was caught. Everybody probably knows of the 25 pound, 1 ounce bass, the biggest largemouth bass that's ever been touched by a human being. That lake was killed out as a result of, I believe, golden algae or some kind of algae bloom. So, if that's an issue in an area, by restricting that, you can, um, combat the movement of invasive species that way. I've heard
right.
it can help with gobies and stuff like that. Which gobies, most fishermen are like, yeah, bring them on, son, because it makes those smallmouth gigantic. So, but
Yeah.
there's a whole lot to have to say about that. Now, I would assume that is because in that area they are dealing with some kind of an invasive right now.
Right,
Specifically,
right.
they're trying to keep from moving from waterway to waterway.
So, man, let's see what time. Dang, it's already 7 o'clock. We talked a full hour and didn't even do no lake study.
That's right.
So, all right. I guess we can kind of move on from grass and look at the graphs. So,
Yeah.
Grass, graph.
yeah. So, but
Yeah.
so Caleb, I want to let you take your time and be able to and tell us like from spring to summer, and maybe it kind of explain like why the bass move the way that they move during that transition time.
Okay, so we're talking
Uh,
like spawn to like post spawn summertime pattern.
yeah.
Right.
Yeah, let's do it.
Let's see.
So one of the things that we've talked about a ton before is that these fish, one, they don't go on at the same time, and two, traditionally when we think of, like reading Bassmaster magazine, we think of the migration of fish. Like the fish will go back into the pockets or to the creeks, and they spawn and they come back out. We know now that a lot of fish just stay main lake. There's a lot of fish that just live deep in general. There's a lot of fish that live shallow in general in the backs of tributaries. There is a portion or like a population of fish that actually does make that migration. Now, whether that's 30% in one fishery or 40% or 60%, I couldn't tell you. I would say in Chickamauga, if I had to guess, it was somewhere around that, maybe 20% of fish or 30% live shallow, 30% live deep, and the rest of them fluctuate somewhere in between. So what you have is you have fish that are spawning main lake on flats, and what they'll do is they'll get to these little neck down points. So you got the main current coming down out here. I don't know if you guys can see my mouse. You got these
Yeah,
segment
we got it.
areas, and then if you push up where these flats neck down, there's a ton of fish that will spawn in those kind of areas just on the neck down portion of the flat. And then you also have the fish that will spawn in the backs of the pockets. Same goes for resident and non-resident fish in some of the creeks. And so what that causes, and the fact that we have so many spawns now on this lake, on Chickamauga, Nickajack especially, is that fish move in and out at a lot more variation in times. And so what you can do is, one, I like to stay ahead of a pattern, right? So I am always checking as soon as we start getting into, like the early post spawn, I'm already checking. Like I'm looking at shell beds in the mid depth range areas such as this, right? These little mid depth ranges. stopping points on the way out of a spawning area. It's a good example right there. That's a good example right there. I'm checking those areas as quick as I can, and I'm looking to see when fish start to get there. And then as soon as I start seeing fish on those little stopping points right there, that's when I start checking like your main island heads, your main lake ledges on your turns and everything like that. And I go from there.
Right.
To me, it's all about staying ahead of the patterns, ahead of the ball game. I want to stay around the biggest population of fish. So what I tend to do is skew myself to where that population of mobile or / migrating fish are going to be. So I want fish coming to me. You hear a lot of guys on, Bassmaster, professional anglers talking about on the front side of a pattern, right? Like I'm on the front side of a pattern. I've got fish coming to me. I don't have fish leaving. So that's what you're looking for in a
Right.
lot of those areas.
But are usually on the front side of those patterns are usually the bigger fish anyways, correct?
Yeah, a lot of times that tends to be the case because in many cases, your big fish tend to spawn first. That doesn't necessarily hold true though all the time though, because the big fish are opportunistic and they're tired from the spawn, and so that coincides really well with like the bluegill spawn. You've got post
Right.
spawn crappie moving out at about the same time that those really big fish are post spawn. And then, of course, you've got a gizzard shad spawn that kind of goes on a little bit sooner and runs pretty long. So there's a lot of times where some of those big fish will actually hang back. I feel like there's a good population of big fish that hang back, and then there's a population that move out, especially as soon as the gizzard shad start to get out in Main Lake.
Yeah.
And they get those real big ones. It seems like when I think of the big fish being out in the community hole, big ledges, I think of little pods. You'll see these small pods of gizzard shad, like 100 or 200, and you'll start to see the fish school on them. They'll be chasing one big gizzard on top. And you also start to see clouds of what looks like, what a lot of people would probably think are gizzard shad, but are actually big bluegill out on the ledges. So that
Wow.
tells me that there's been a good wave of bluegill spawning. So, whereas the big bass that were eating the bluegill spawner is going to be, they're going to follow the bluegill out to the ledges.
Yeah.
I don't think bluegill get enough credit on the lake either, because I've seen ledges that will ghost town from big fish as soon as there's a mayfly hatch.
Yeah.
Like they will be gone. Like every fish, it seems like over 6 pounds is like suddenly gone. And they're the only thing I can figure is they're following the bluegill to your bluff wall transitions where you've got bigger mayfly hatches.
Yeah. Now, another question is, it's on Chickamauga during the summertime. Is there anything called a too big of a bait?
Too big of the bait in the summertime? No. God, you can always get attention with a big bait. And fish in Chickamauga and a lot of parts of the Tennessee River specifically are very cued in from like a really young age to eating big bait. So I feel like you can always get attention on it. What's funny is that a lot of times in the summer when you get really big schools of fish on these ledges and stuff, what'll happen is that the giant bait actually will just get eaten by like a 2 or 3 pounder because it gets the attention of the whole school, and
Right.
grandmama doesn't get up there fast enough, and some little 2 pounder goes up there and obliterates it. So I don't think there's any such thing as a bait being too large. However, I feel like sometimes a small bait can be more effective overall in catching that right fish. It's very,
Right.
very situational. That's why this time of year, a lot of times, if I'm doing a live bait trip, for instance, I'll bring a variety. Like I like to have a pretty good little mix between some mid-sized thread fins all the way up to some smaller hand-sized gizzards, all the way up to maybe a couple gigantors, and I kind of gauge off of that. This time of year, if everything goes according to plan, well, a lot of times we have to go catch extra bait anyway. So,
Yeah.
that first little load of bait, the first couple good ledges, you can kind of gauge for the day
The
what's
size.
going on.
Another question is, it says, I'm new to the TVA lakes. When does grass usually start matting?
That's a good question. So they've recently changed. I can't tell you exactly how many years ago. A few years ago, they changed our draw period. So in other words, the time it takes us to get to full pool takes a little longer. So in years past, June is when you would start to see some grass topping out in the lake. With that top out period or that summer pool period being pushed back, I would say you're not really in. From 60 Bridge down, you probably won't see a whole lot of matted vegetation until sometime in July, is what I would assume this year, is what I would think. Now, upriver above that, where there's really no spraying at all, I would assume that you're going to see that a little sooner, especially, and there's a lot of factors that go along with this. It depends on how much rain we have, how much dirty water we have, because if you have a lot of current, you have dirty water, and you have, so at that point, you're not getting sunlight during the rainstorms, so the grass is not photosynthesizing, and then you have a bunch of debris as far as sediment blocking sunlight after that fact, and then you have sediment that's getting hung onto the grass itself, which impedes it. So if you have like a year with a lot of rain and a lot of dirty water specifically, it could take a much longer time for grass that is directly affected by that to get to that point. So
Right.
just by itself, and that goes back to the management of grass. Just by itself, there's a whole lot of environmental factors to think about when it comes to that.
Here we go down that rabbit hole again.
Yeah. So, Matt Dillon says, what do you look for, and how do you find fish in high pressured lakes with locals on the weekends? What do you look for?
So thankfully, a lot of my fishing I do during the week, and so I have a much better time getting on some of the community holes and stuff like that. And that's kind of, I try to stick to a lot of the community holes for my fishing through the week, especially live baiting, so that I'm not burning up the whole lake and burning up a lot of the sneakier areas on the lake. So when I do fish on the weekend and there's a lot of tournament pressure, I start to really think outside the box. That's when I might run all the way back in a creek and fish for resident fish, really shallow. I might run a few lines of docks. I've got some docks on the lake that are pretty good about holding fish. Another kind of a sleeper is marinas. When things are busy, fish on marinas tend to bite better anyway. They're used to the activity, and when there's more activity, it spooks the bait around in marina. They tend to bite better. And it's nice because a lot of marinas have no wake zones. So if you're tired of getting thrashed around on the river, out on the ledge, with a bunch of big boats going by and whatnot, it's a kind of a more relaxing thing that you can do is go in a marina, and then you can people watch too. It's like going to an airport. It's great.
Yeah, that's always fun.
Yeah.
Now we're going to have 40 boats in the middle of Harrison Bay.
Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. So those are things that I try to do is I try to think outside the box a little bit. It's like, can I go really far back in an area where, a lot of people wouldn't be comfortable going, run a pattern on some really, really shallow fish. So that's the thing. There's always multiple patterns running on a lake. Almost every time there's multiple things going on, especially
you just got to be willing to go try to find them.
Exactly.
Find that pattern.
So just because, ledge fishing might be the deal right now, right? That might be the way to win a tournament. But if you get out there and there's, 400 tournament boats on the water and every ledge is like take a number, it might be a good time to go and kind of mess around with some springs. Maybe go in the back of a creek. Just do something, fish outside the box a little bit because there's going to be fish on all that. And the good thing about fishing outside the box is a lot of times you end up running across fish that are not seeing a bait all the time.
Mm-hmm.
They're not being pressured as much. So you might stumble upon like a really fun pattern to run. One of the things, some of the most busy times of the year, let's think about like Labor Day and Memorial Day, right? Like there's just tons of boat traffic.
Yeah.
One thing that my dad and I figured out way back in the day is we had some bluff walls that we'd go fish, and the big waves would create a mud line and knock out all the crawfish and bluegill. And you could just go down those little mudline banks and catch, big smallmouth until you got tired of catching fish, or it got, waked out of there and then leave and go back to the house when it got too hot. So there's all kinds
Yeah.
of options. Another great option is night fishing, guys. I highly recommend, like, if you really want a shot at a giant fish post spawn, especially during the grass months on Chickamauga, night fishing is the way to go. So that's another way
Yeah,
to eat.
that's kind of. I've always enjoyed night fishing. For one, it's there's less boat traffic.
Yep.
Two, it's not as hot. But to me, it seems like the fish are more active.
There's
They may be and they may not be, but it just the ratio goes up for me.
I know that at night, like those are some of they are the most vicious bites that I've ever had from largemouth bass. Been on like a
Yeah.
night blade or a jig or a big worm.
Yep.
But yeah, there's something special about that fishing at night. And I mean, like you said, beat the heat, beat the crowds, and go out there. Now, one thing that we used to do back in the day is that we would just wake up tremendously early. If you're not, maybe you're not a night owl, maybe you're a morning person like I am. One thing that's really nice to do is just wake up at go to bed a little early, wake up at 2 in the morning, go out there, fish until about 10 a.m. when the crowds kind of get out there, and then just go in, call it a day.
Yeah.
Get a
Yeah.
full, fishing trip. You get to fish some daylight, you get to fish some night fishing. You're in prime time. It's a great way to beat the crowds, fish what you want to fish, and get on those.
Right.
Well, Caleb, the reason why he likes fishing at night is because everything is a 6-pounder. So, I mean,
Yeah.
No, it's 7.
I'll 7.
Yeah.
So, oh man, hey Caleb, I want to give you the opportunity to advertise for yourself and kind of tell, because you just don't like BassQuest Fishing Charters just does not take people out fishing. Can you explain? Well, I mean, like kind of what you do, like other than that, how you can kind of.
That's probably what I'm most known for right now is BassQuest Fishing Charters, going out and catching huge fish, on guided trips. And you can get on my website, bassquestfishingcharters.com, and book a guide trip with me. That's a phenomenal way to get out in the water and get a really good chance of catching your PB, maybe even a double-digit fish. But another thing that I do is map studies. So we were talking a lot, the kind of my nerdy side of things, talking a lot about maps and stuff. I really enjoy breaking down other people's maps. So if you've got a home lake, maybe you're out of state and you struggle on that lake, I can break that lake down for you, and we'll satellite images all the way to going back in history on the satellite images, marking waypoints, transferring waypoints. There's all kinds of things that you can go into on that, and strategies that have helped me traveling all over the country, like when I'm going to Michigan or Florida, picking spots out months in advance, and then going catching fish on those areas and catching big fish on those areas, extremely rewarding. So if you're interested in that, like the map study aspect of things, definitely hit me up at the same thing at the website there. You can book an online map study. What we'll do is we'll go one-on-one, talk about your lake, and I actually record the session, and I'll send you the recording so you can always refer back to it in the future and, take notes later on if you want to, in order to, maximize your time. Because that's really what it's about. Like a lot of people have limited time on the water, and so it really behooves you to go out with some kind of a plan, even if that goes awry, and to have homework done so that when you do get on a pattern, you immediately know of other places that are going to work for that pattern in your head. You're not scrambling halfway through the day trying to figure out, oh gosh, I just caught him on this point on this, like an inside turn on this flat. Like, where else can I go to do this before I go to weigh in? You've already done the homework. You're confident because that was one of the spots that you picked out. You have 3 more just like it.
Yeah.
Now you're going to go run those, and that's going to make you more successful. It's a lot of fishing is a mathematics game, right? Like it's casting 20% better. Guys like Bank Shaw and the Nut Brothers, they beat you in tournaments. A lot of it is just because they are a lot more efficient with their time on the water.
Yeah.
Everything is, there's no wasted energy, there's no wasted anything. And it reminds me a lot of like Kevin Van Dam was a good representation of that. Just really high octane, no wasted movement, um, and a plan, right? Like we're running and gunning, we're paying attention to everything that's going on. So that's what I try to do in my fishing as well, is to just pay attention to everything that's going on. But that homework in advance allows you to take your time on the water, pay attention to what you see in front of you, and then be able to reference back. So it can be
Yeah.
highly
And I
effective.
think I remember a video like years ago that you done, and you kind of hit on it, but he's like map studying is so important to be able to go and fish on the body of lake because let's say you know that you're catching them on a rock riprap or whatever, then your map study is going to be able to help you know, like, well, I know I've got 3 rock ripraps that I can hit within this half a mile, and to where if you're not doing any kind of map studying,
And you're
you would
hitting
not
the key
know.
points on those areas, right? You're hitting the
Right.
highlights. And that's especially important in bodies of water where you can get kind of analysis paralysis. So, say you're on a grass lake and there's oceans of grass out there. By doing your homework and finding the drains and the hard spots and the anomalies on those flats in advance, you can go directly to the high percentage areas. Same thing with standing timber. You know, you might have a lake that's all standing timber. Dylan Florida did a
Yeah.
great example of that, like the fish in Texas. Spent a bunch of time looking at heat maps for the hard spots and the drains that had hard spots. So he was able to
Yeah.
dial in. It wasn't just the drains; it was the drains that had hard areas, probably shell. And so he was able to maximize his time. Instead of hitting 60 drains to find the 10 that were good, he was able to hit 20 and find the 10 that were good. So
Yeah.
maximizing his time on the water. And
Yeah.
that's the difference between, like, if you're a tournament guy, that's a lot of times the difference between cutting a check and not cutting a check, because
Yeah.
it takes a lot of the guesswork out. It takes a lot of the stress out to have that homework done in advance, because that's something like you can't go and practice on those bodies of water, but you can do this. And all of this time that you put into this pays mega dividends when you get out in the water and actually see what's in front of you. You start having success on one thing, and your brain, it starts turning. The wheels start turning, and you start checking out other areas that you've already located that are going to relate to that. And so
Yeah.
that's the difference between like running and gunning and driving down the lake to try to put a pattern together and already having waypoints in mind for that pattern.
Yeah. Now, Patrick says, do you fish the fish attractors that are on the map?
Occasionally. Very occasionally I do. Sometimes they're loaded up with bluegill and crappie. And when that's the case, there's pretty good bet that there's at least 1 or 2 giant fish hanging around them. So never a bad
Yeah.
idea to fish something like that. There's tons of stuff that you can just find, though. You take a little time to, again, do your little map study, and you find some high percentage areas. And what I do is I'll get in an area and I'll start to idle around. That's when I start to plot side scan. And then I'm looking for cover on the structure. The structure is the topography of the lake. The cover is your stumps, trees, grass, anything that's on that. So you can find what I call the spot on the spot. It's the key area within that key structure, and that's a lot of times where you're going to catch that really big fish, because
Yeah.
big fish are territorial, and what they tend to do is they tend to lock down the prime real estate, right? So they're going to lock down the best area on that really good area. And so if you can find those areas, a lot of times that's how you end up finding the big fish. And it might not be right on it. You know, it could be a little off to the side. You might kind of idle down through there and see a bunch of fish on a lip or a shell bed. And then there's a big stump, you know, apart from
Yeah.
that, or like a little rock pile that somebody's put out. Sometimes that's just the difference. Like you catch a bunch of fish in the one area, but you make the cast at that one little anomaly over there, and that's your 8-pounder.
Yeah. Couple questions real quick. Let's see. Matthew says, do you teach any on the forward facing sonar?
Yeah, I actually do. I do some electronic trips from time to time, and I enjoy breaking down the forward-facing sonar. I get a lot of time with it. I get to see a ton of big fish with it, and so it's pretty fun to kind of look at all that, especially certain times of year. Most of the time when I'm fishing this time of year, though, it's more of a tool for me to catch bait. Really, I'm going to go out there and catch bait with it, and then I'm going to go and check an area and just see, kind of pull up. Because nowadays, if you idle over these fish like in real time, sometimes you can't turn around and catch them. Sometimes they'll spread out on you. So forward facing
Yeah.
can be a great tool to pull up to a waypoint and then just look out there and just see if they're set up the way you want them set up, and then you can stop and fish for them. That's what I personally prefer to do. I love to go out and like actually use the live scope, and shake a minnow and stuff like that. But it's really fun to me just to kind of, okay, there's fish there, and then just spot lock and just fish.
Yeah.
Yeah.
To me, that's like a really good way to do it, and especially if I'm throwing live bait anyway. It's like, if I'm on a live bait trip, I'm like, man, I just feel bad like live baiting and live scoping each fish. Like there's
It's a
only so
double
much
whammy.
I can take. So.
Another question says, have you ever caught any big fish in a cast net?
Yes, that's a great question. So twice now, I've had 2 over 10 at the same time in the cast net on a throw. And
So
I had
20
one
pounds.
time that I had my best 5 I had in the net on one throw. I caught a bunch of golden shiners, and in one throw I had 38 and some change pounds in 5 largemouth with like 2 other 4-pounders that were in. So, this is so funny. It's the most random thing. What happens is a lot of times in the dead of winter, like when it's really, really, really cold, the shad will just group up in these tremendous schools, and it's floor to ceiling. You can't see anything in there, and you'll cast, and you'll just land on these. You'll catch a giant bass that's in the middle of those shad. And there's this weird thing that happens where it's like the shad won't even part. They won't make a hole for the bass. It's almost like an understanding, guys, it's cold as heck out here. Let's just chill for a little while. And that's what kind of prompted me to start freelining and throwing a float with a big bait in the middle of those huge schools of shad. And you would think there's no way they'd ever find your bait. And you'll just be easing down through there. It's just a solid wall of bait. And all of a sudden, your one will go down out of sight. It'd be a 9-pounder or something. It's like, because yours is the one that's not acting right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Matt Dillon says, do you fish the thermocline?
So in Chickamauga, you don't really have a thermocline. A lot of river fisheries, because there's enough water turnover, you're not really going to see that. Now, I actually saw a thermocline to a degree back in 2016 because they shut the water off for so many days in a row that in areas, a great example, let's see here.
You going back to the map?
Yeah, going back to the map. So, like, the only areas that you might see a thermocline on a river fishery is right in the great white area. No, I'm just kidding. Here's a good example. Like Harrison Bay, you've got the main river channel hugging this edge, and you've got this huge, like, backwater area with a secondary channel. If you get a ton of heat and they're hardly running any flow and you're not getting any rain, like in these areas, you can actually begin to see something that resembles a thermocline. It's more of like a dead water area. You'll start to notice fish suspended up. And I really noticed this a lot with the live bait because you'll throw your minnow down there and they'll just die. Like every cast you'll throw, and if you get them to the bottom, they're dead. And so you just have to start freelining your minnow. And it's kind of a neat thing because you always kind of wondered why, fish in certain areas around here would suspend up. Is because they're suspended up because they can't sit on the bottom. They'll suffocate.
Yeah.
So that's probably the closest thing that I've seen to a thermocline. It's just pockets of dead water in areas that are kind of getting a weird flow or not getting enough flow during the peak parts of the summer.
Another question says, is it true when you look at a shad ball with an eye in it, it's a bass?
Well, I mean, it could be a whole lot of things. Could be a big catfish, could be a striper, could be a white bass, could be a crappie, or it could be a largemouth. A lot of that depends on the behavior of the fish itself. Bass have a certain swagger. It's really the only way I can describe it. Like they have a certain way that they swim and a certain kind of swagger that you'll see on the live scope. And when you see those two things, you know that's probably a bass right there. Crappie, you know, a lot of times they're more stationary.
Yeah.
You know, they're not moving around, and when they do move around, it's kind of a slower speed. Catfish tend to have like a different swagger. They're more like a tadpole on there. But drum and bass can be hard sometimes. That's probably the two that are hardest because drum, when they're on the move and they're on bait, they kind of swim about the same speed. The head is almost right. So unless you're really paying attention or you catch a few of them, sometimes you can mistake a drum for a bass in the school there. But striper, it's obvious because they swim freaking fast everywhere they go. So their cadence
Yeah.
is way faster. But bass have a certain rhythm, cadence to them. So if you throw out there, say the best way to describe it is throw a umbrella rig or a spinner bait and slow roll it and watch it on the screen. That's about the speed. There's like this little swagger that they kind of move around on, and they've got this kind of back and forth the way that they, I guess, wiggle or swim itself. And once you've seen it a number of times, you start to just kind of recognize it right off the bat that okay, that's the right deal in there. Now it can be a little bit more difficult when you get on some of the ledges. When you have a tremendous school of fish, it can be really difficult. Like when you have maybe there's 200 white bass down there, there's 50 bass, there's 40 catfish, a bunch of drum, a bunch of walleyes. Like at that point, you're just looking for me. A lot of times, it's looking for a bigger mark, kind of that where there's a personal space bubble because bass will always have a personal space bubble. They do not like to get more than like 2 to 3 feet apart. That's what they like. So if I see that and I see bigger marks, I'm going to throw at that. And then based on how those fish react, that's when I'll determine if I think they're a bass or something else.
Right.
Yeah. That's interesting.
So, well, Caleb, do you got a guide trip tomorrow?
I sure do. I've got a couple of my favorite people from some guys from West Virginia that are just a pleasure to hang out with, and I'll be taking them out tomorrow. He's got his 2 sons, 2 kiddos, and they are some hammers. So I'm gonna have some meat in the boat tomorrow. If I can put them on fish, them boys are gonna catch them. So it'll be a pleasure for me to take them out. It's gonna be a good time. Might even have Mr. AJ Barnes come out and join us for a little while tomorrow, which would be even cooler.
Heck yeah.
Local hammer. So we're just going to play around out there and run around the lake. I've got a few places in mind. Hopefully we're going to smash them.
Yeah, I'd like to get on some of them strappers that I've seen that you.
I think we're going to play with that tomorrow. I think I'm going to like just not say a word and just like waltz in there. Just like, hey, go over there. But before we go any further, I also want to throw a shout out to, we were talking about night fishing earlier. And for guys that have never tried that, I highly recommend that you go talk to Hunter Cordell at Elite Glow. He makes the best black lights in the business, as far as fishing lights.
Well, and they don't fade.
Huh?
They don't fade.
No, they don't fade, and it's really like you have to get a run at it to have a dead spot. The fuses are so big, everything. Hunter's one of those guys that he's like, if he sees a failure point, he's going to over-engineer it. He gets his own lights made to his own specs. And so there's really nothing else. Like if you think you're going to buy black lights somewhere, I'd highly caution you against that. You should definitely go with his because they are the best. It's because he's engineered out the failure points. His spotlights or headlights are the best. So highly recommend, guys. It's not very expensive at all. That is like the best spending of money that you can do in the summertime is to go get some good black lights on your boat and go out there and just have a good time. Because that takes the guesswork out of it. It is really difficult to go from never night fishing to just going out there in the pitch black with a headlamp and like trying to throw at a bank or something or a grass line. It can be really daunting because depth perception is just crazy. I fished for years without really anything other than a headlamp. and just watching my graph. And I actually did better just watching my graph, not even turning my headlamp on. But having the man is life changing. The way he does it, he has the black light, the ultraviolet, the purple strip, and then there's a green strip in the middle of it. And so the green allows you to see distance. The purple allows you to, get the light penetration right there. And it's phenomenal.
Yeah. And that the green light also, for the crappie guys, will attract the bait fish too.
Yeah, absolutely. You'll get bait fish in there. One thing I will tell you, certain times of year you can get a lot of bugs night fishing around your lights and stuff, especially the anchor light. So if you can kind of keep that anchor light far back and fish towards the front, that can help you. But I highly recommend you get a thermocell. It's like $100. Get a thermocell, and man, those things work really good for keeping mosquitoes off you in the summertime.
And another thing, while we're talking lights, FireFly Outdoor Marine,
yes,
their stern light will not attract any bugs.
Yeah, it's different. I've seen that. I've seen that. I talked to him a little bit at the deal there.
And I've got it. I've got them in my boat, and it you can go at night and go down the bank, and you could count rocks on the bank with that stern light.
It's interesting. It almost looks like a lightsaber or something back there.
Yeah,
it kind of looks cool. It's one of those things. It's like it's an effective tool, and there's a reason for it. But also, it's just something cool to have on your boat too. It's just like look at that light up candy cane back there, kind of deal.
So, but Hunter with Elite Glow has put everything that's electronics on my boat. He has done it. I do not take it to anybody else because I know as soon as I take my boat in there to him, it's getting done right. And I also know that if I have any questions with anything, it's just a phone call away. I've called him at 9:30, 10 o'clock at night. I was out on the water and I had an issue. And if he didn't answer, he called me back within like 5-10 minutes. So he will always answer the phone. So
that's what's really great. Another cool thing, kind of interesting about Hunter, is that he works outside of normal business hours a lot. He works really late a lot. He enjoys night fishing and working into the night. So it's wonderful as a fisherman because a lot of times, me, Tanner, or Dylan, like one of the other guys, we break our stuff during the day and he can fix it for us at night. It's phenomenal. It's a win-win. So if you're ever in a pinch, you have a wiring electronics thing that you need fixed, and you're like, dang, I don't have anybody to call. I got to wait till tomorrow or what. Hunter is a great person to call to, fix a number of issues like that. And a lot of times he can kind of get you in. And not only that, you get to hang out at his awesome shop over there for a minute and talk with him. So just highly recommend. I just wanted to say that because we were talking about night fishing. I'm like, I can't let that slip up and not tell people about the lights because it is a night and day difference between having black lights and not, especially when you're starting out night fishing, man. It can turn it in, take it from being like, oh my gosh, it's this daunting, difficult thing to a pleasure to do.
Yeah.
So, but other than that, I don't know. I don't even know what time it is. We've had you on for an hour, almost an hour.
It's almost bedtime for me, boys. Early tomorrow.
To be honest with you, I'm surprised old Becky hadn't brought you some food, or Becca hadn't brought you some food.
Out and got me one of my favorite things to eat. She's got me Vine Street in there, but I didn't quite have enough time to eat it. So I was just like, I'm just going to warm it up. I've got me a Boar's Roar back there, delicious sandwich with some pasta salad. I'm about to heat that sucker up, eat it, hang out with my lady for a minute, and then go to bed and do it all again tomorrow.
Yeah,
there you go.
So guys, last time Caleb was on, if you remember, he was kicking the boat sideways and the truck sideways to get here on time.
Yeah.
And I can't remember what he was eating, but he brought in Becca brought in like a plate for him, and he was like, "Hey, let's go on and get onto the map study," because he knows that I cover up the map study. So, but man, Caleb, thank you again so much. We gotta do this again, and
Absolutely.
This podcast really did not go the way that I was expecting. I really was not expecting all the questions and stuff about it. We did go down some rabbit holes, which you've been on here 3 or 4 times already, and
a lot of times I think it's the best conversation though, because it's the conversation that you have in a tackle shop, right?
Yeah, you just go with the flow. I mean, go where it takes you, and But I just want to say I thoroughly enjoy listening to you, the knowledge that you have, and the passion that you got for it. I mean, I've learned so much just watching some of your videos, and I will say this on the map studying, you've got to be one of the best people person that I've ever seen in map studying. I mean, you're phenomenal, man. You're phenomenal.
My thing is I don't know how good he is on the map studies, because I've seen him pull up to some places that should not hold any fish. He's whispering to these things and telling them, "Hey, come on,
you call it what you want. I'm gonna call it map studying." I mean,
some of it's map study, some of it's your satellite study is a big thing too, because that's how you can find stuff that's just you find anomalies. Anomalies is another great way to get off the beat.
Well, it's kind of. I do the same thing with hunting. I got this app. It's called OnX app.
Yeah.
And I do a lot of map studying during hunting season. Well, before hunting season, really.
Oh, yeah.
I'll pick out just different places and I'll just start breaking it down. Then I'll go put boots on ground, and say, okay, now everything's starting to make sense. And I can relate to that, So it's interesting to see it on the water side.
Yeah, it's same concept though.
Yeah.
I used to do that all the time for deer hunting, breaking out topo maps. I've always loved topo maps.
Yeah.
It's a 2D representation of your 3D world, and you can see through it's cool because, like, if you look at a satellite, it's just trees.
Yeah.
It's forest. It's some shadowing and shading, but a topographical map, when you overlay that, it cuts through all that. Like, I can find. I used to be able to find waterfalls when I was hiking and doing trail runs to go trout fish and stuff like that. Find waterfalls. You can find all the pools. Even though you can't even see it on the satellite, you can tell by the terrain that that's going to be the area where it's going to work.
Right.
There's all kinds of neat things that you can do with the topo map. To me, it's a hobby and a joy, but it's also like a cool skill to have, to be able to. The more you look at them, the more that you can quickly relate those two things. So when I see a topographical map, I see that 2D image in 3D. And that's one reason why I really enjoy the C map that we were using, that heat map.
Yeah.
The way that they're doing things now, it shows you the shading itself. To me, is a better representation of the 3D space than just the topo.
Yeah.
So it kind of gives, if you're new to reading a topo map, the shading gives you it almost looks 3-dimensional. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So,
well, and it also
helps
it's easy for you to be able to put the shading in on these units now.
Yeah. It's something that's definitely worthwhile doing. I highly recommend, if you're struggling looking at topo maps in general, if you're struggling to visualize in your head what you're actually looking at there, the saltwater, if you go to like CMAP or one of these other softwares and look at saltwater charts, because their technology as far as graphing and plotting is light years ahead of freshwater and bass fishing. It can really, really show you like exactly what a ridge or a point or any of those things look like on the topo. So if you kind of glance back and forth on those, then it gives you a good reference. And so does a map like that one. Gives you a great reference to go back and be like, okay, now you start to understand what you're actually looking at there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But if you look at them enough, it just, to me, I just see everything that's there. I see it in
Yeah.
dimensions, like in different angles. However I want to see it, I can see it. I wish I could, put that in Blender and actually show it that way, like to, capture that for people to be like, just pull that hump and run it through Blender and have it show a 3D version of it that we could scroll around and look at all the little anomalies and stuff on it. Maybe one of these days we'll get to that point.
Yeah. Real quick, your wife has some stuff that she makes that is excellent for some fishermen.
Yes.
Can you talk about that real quick, and then we'll get off it?
So one thing that she makes that's awesome is her lip balm, and these are beeswax products that she makes from the beeswax from our bees, her bees in the backyard over here. But the lip balm, the nice thing about that is you don't have to reapply it. I don't know how to describe it other than that. Like, instead of having a lot of additives like some of these lip balms do that kind of dry your mouth out again on purpose so that you have to keep reapplying it, this just goes on, it works, and it heals. That's it. Beeswax in general, what the properties that make it up has healing properties in it. So her lotion bar, I use on my hands. So if you're somebody that is out in the sun like I am all the time, you have working hands, someone that has to use O'Keeffe's in the wintertime because your hands split or crack, or you have bass palm like I've got right now, and all kinds of abrasions from way too many dang white bass out on the ledges right now. I can go and rub that on there. It is incredible how you can go, like, I'll put my aftershave on, and I'm like, dang, I'm cut all to pieces. And the next day, after using her product, like, I'm like, man, ain't nothing going on. Like, I'm good. Yeah. So I highly recommend. And the thing is, it's not like, I just don't like.
It's not oily at all.
Yeah, exactly. Puerto Rican skin, like, we just have ashy skin in general. So it's like it wants to get dried out and stuff like that. And so I had to use like different lotions and stuff growing up every once in a while if my skin got bad. And I always hated it because it was just like bleh, greasy and nasty. And like you couldn't grip stuff after you got done, putting it on. And this is nothing like that. It's something, I even use it on my face a lot in the wintertime for windburn. So to protect your skin against like really harsh cold, like when it's 18 degrees outside and you're running around like a madman on the lake, you can take that and it's like war paint on there, rub it on, and it is amazing. Like your face will just be just whipped and burnt, and then the next day it like hurts to the touch. The next day it'll be fine. So I highly recommend somebody pick that up and just try it. Like you'll love it. Your wife will love it.
Can they get it on your website?
Yeah, so you can go to Becca's Backyard and pick that up.
I will put that link in our description.
Put her product on my website too. That'd be a good idea. But yeah, if you check her out on Instagram or Facebook, Becca's Backyard, and pick up her, I highly recommend. Like, lip balm's awesome, but me as a fisherman, like, I can't do without the lotion bar. And it's funny, we started selling it in Talk and Tackle, and it just, everybody, all the guides, everybody uses it. They're like, oh my gosh, this stuff works like incredible. And so I highly recommend go check it out. If you're somebody that gets out in the outdoors like we do, and just the sun, the elements are merciless on your skin and stuff. You would be amazed at what it'll do for you.
Yeah. So I meant to grab some at the expo, but we were running around like a chicken with his head cut off.
Yeah.
And so I'm gonna go. I will swing by Talk and Tackle.
Dude, I'll buy you one and put it in the boat for you. So whenever I get your boat back to you, it'll be sitting there waiting on you.
Heck yeah. Heck yeah. So, but guys, this has been a little bit different podcast than what I was really expecting. I was expecting to have a little bit more on the lake study, but I thoroughly enjoyed.
I loved every minute of
it. And that's the thing about, like, when you go out with Caleb, I mean, he's an open book. You just got to ask questions, and I have learned so much as being in the boat with him, as much as I have watching his YouTube channel, and are just calling him up and saying, hey, this is what I got going on. What should I be doing, or what should I look for? And so go to BassQuest Fishing Charters and book you a trip And if you're wanting to learn something, if it's with electronics or even just more in depth of a map study, or if you just want to go and try to catch your PB, this is the man to go catch your PB with. I have never seen somebody, again, I tell everybody that he's a fish whisperer, and he's phenomenal. I really love getting out on the water with him, and I can't wait till the next time we go. So I know, and he's got a tradition with me. I've caught so many double digits with him.
Yeah.
So many.
Yeah.
But none of them
every time he catches a double digit, and it's usually right about the time he's like, man, it'd be cool if we caught a double digit. Boom, catfish, drum, like anything but a bass.
Yeah.
What chupacabra, you know. Got it. Yeah.
So,
one of these days they're going to run out of species, right?
Yeah.
At a certain point, there will be no double-digit species left, and it'll just have to be a bass by proxy.
They'll have to be. I mean, they'll have to be. So, we got one more question for you.
Yeah.
That you've already have answered this probably multiple times, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah.
Happy you want to ask it?
So, if you had one person that you could bring on the boat with you, past, present, who would that person be and why?
Past, present. I tell you what, there's a lot of like really cool anglers. I think last time I said Richard Jean or something like that because I'd love to get out on the boat with Richard Jean or Rocky Drake. But if I can go into the past, I would love to take my great-great-grandfather fishing on my dad's side. He instilled a love. He's a World War II veteran, fought in Bastogne. He's a paratrooper, 101st.
Oh, wow.
So if you've watched Band of Brothers, you've seen, their journey through there. But he did that, and then he used to build his own boats out of wood.
Really?
And he got my grandfather into fishing, my pawpaw, and they used to go down and fish all the time. My pawpaw got my dad into fishing. The rest is history. Ever since I was in diapers, I've been down the lake there fishing. So I'd like to take my great-granddaddy fishing, or my great-great-granddaddy. That's what I'd like to do.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
So, and if you have any more questions, look him up on Facebook, shoot him a message, and he will answer, or Becca will answer if she can.
Becca probably. She's the responsible one.
Yeah.
You'll ask me. You're like, hey, dummy.
Yeah. So, but guys, thank you for lasting with us for almost 2 hours.
Yeah.
And man, Caleb, thank you again so much, brother.
Yeah, thank you.
Absolutely. It's great talking with you guys. I'm about to warm up this food and get at it.
I heard that.
Have a good one, brother. And we will. Next week we got we have the traveling fisherman. Kind of little cliff notes on him. His wife is a traveling nurse, so he travels all around the United States. Here about, I'd say 3 weeks to a month ago, he was in Florida. Now he's in Alaska. So he's going to be coming on next week. It is going to be another heck of a show talking about fishing in different parts of the country. And so you do not want to miss it. It's a great guy. And but make sure you go BassQuest fishing charters. Go schedule your trip and go get on a big one. So guys, hope you have a blessed day, and we will see you next time.
All right. See y'all later.
See you.
See you, brother.